That would be a yes. She heard you.
All right, so there we go. So good evening, everyone that's here. Welcome to everyone that's joined in and to everyone else that's still signing on. Welcome to our 4th edition of the Zone 1 webinar, which also doubles as a podcast for those who listens to it afterwards, who wants to maybe listen in the car. The audio of the webinar gets recorded and it's on Spotify, and Chanel will put up the link there for you guys to go and follow us on that podcast, please. That would be great. We can also use that platform at a later stage for other things, but if it's easier to listen in the car for some that can't join, then that's just the reason for that. Also, guys, before we start, just some house rules or house announcements, rather, that we're going to have a question and answer session at the end, but please do post your questions in the comments of the Zoom chat at the bottom, and then we will look at them afterwards and we'll answer as many of them as we can. If there's more questions than we can answer, then I promise I will answer them on my social media in the week to come. But post them there, and then me and Doug will do our best to get through some of the good questions. So the aim of this, for those that are
it's got to be a good question.
There we go. So
yeah.
Before we get to Doug there, the aim of the Zone 1 webinar is to support you guys as therapists and activators around the world, to share a little bit more insight, share a little bit more teaching, keep you guys up to date with the latest things that's happening in the world of Be Activated, workshops coming up. But the aim is to support you and to check in with you so that we know where you're at and that we can provide a little bit more support and help you to do the work that we all love. Now, as I started the Zone 1 webinar in the beginning of the year, with my first guest being Douglas, we have got Doug on again for the last one for the year. So welcome, Doug, and thank you for being here.
Cool. Very, very great pleasure.
So something that I've been doing on these webinars, just because we have people often also listening that is just here to see what Be Activated is all about, I give a very short summary of my definition and my simple explanation of what I think Be Activated is. So this time around, they've all heard me explaining that. I thought, Doug, what about, can you give us a short explanation for someone that has never seen anything about Be Activated? What is it about?
No pressure.
Why should it interest them?
It tells me ease into this. What? So what is the question?
The question is,
give me the one line.
What is Be Activated to someone that doesn't know much about it? What is the simple explanation of what Be Activated is?
So Coral, I think that the thing that we always do in Be Activated is we first want to know who you are. Because if we know who you are, how we answer the question changes.
Yeah. So let's say we have a therapist.
Well, first we'd say, have you been living under a rock? They would say yes. Then we would say, are you frustrated that you're doing the same thing day after day? This sounds like a sales pitch. And your clients keep coming back and they go, no, but that's the business model that you want in your business. And you'd go, no, actually, it's not. It's boring when you keep seeing the same people over and over. I would like to see new people. And so, okay, I'm obviously going off in a different direction, but what is Be Activated? Be Activated is something where we look at the priorities of the body, and the priorities in survival are breathing and moving. And if we keep going back to that as the body's priority and why things are manifesting the way they are, then we have a far better chance of answering the body's questions and needs so that we can impact on strength and power and flexibility, endurance, speed, balance, coordination. But that means we can shift pain patterns, dysfunction, mental, emotional stuff. And as we're going to talk about today, we can have a massive impact in the world where, like something like spinal cord injuries, where people believe this is as far as you can go because my spinal cord is severed. And we're discovering that when we still go back to the body's priorities, a lot of where they're stuck at isn't necessarily real. And it's mind-blowing for me, and it's compelling for me, and makes me very excited by what we're doing.
Fantastic, thank you. Something that just a little phrase that I use on my on my social media that I really like about, in a simple way about what we do as well, is to say that if we can remove the restrictions in our body, then and let the body do the rest, because our body's got this amazing ability to heal and correct itself. If we sometimes just assist our clients to remove those restrictions that actually is preventing them from functioning optimally, and it's as simple as that, I think, with what we do with this work in some ways.
Yeah. And I think the stress is on the simplicity element, because there's a lot of complexity out in the world, and the minute it's far too complex, then it's really hard to navigate and find your way into something. So we always, an example would be when I was with you in May, and before we did the teaching, you showed me doing zone 1 differently the way you do it in your practice. And I went, cool, that's really cool. Let's teach it that way in Australia. And that's now how I teach it, dude. So just bit of a thank you, because so what it means, the quick version would be that the hamstring points and the hamstring test have been shifted a little bit, and what we do is we call them the third glute points, and people seem to go, but that's much more simple and more straightforward. So it's helped, and the goal of the game is the simplification. So thank you.
Cool. Well, and we're going to come back a little bit to about what's happening on the workshops and what can be expected. But as always, there's always new things. If you guys think there isn't always new things, I meet up with Doug pretty regularly, and every time that I teach with Doug, there's new things that I haven't seen. So there's a pretty good chance, if you haven't been to every single course we've taught, that there's new things you haven't seen. So if you haven't been with us for a while, then make sure.
So I've just finished in London and Scotland, and I was writing frantically because in London we got 2 new things coming up, and in Scotland 5. And for me, these are game changers. I don't always, I'm just making that number up, obviously. No, not really. I was frantically writing it down because we were finding things, and the things that I often look at and see in the body, but until I put it on a workshop, like I can teach it to you, but then everyone in the room's got to go do it and see if it works for them too. Because if something works for me, but it's not applicable when we hand it over to somebody else, then it's not a good principle.
Yeah.
Then it's just something that was lucky and we didn't understand it. But we've got a lot of cool stuff that's always happening. So I love teaching.
All right. So look, I had this planned for a little bit later, but would you share with us a little bit about what can people expect of workshops in the new year? Give us a little bit of an insight of what might be different from, if you haven't done a workshop in a while, what looks different on the 4-day, it's not new anymore, but the 4-day workshop that we run these days, and maybe what has been added lately.
Well, I think, Carl, that first, and you and I have discussed this a lot. Like I've said, post-lockdown and COVID, we've actually had to shift the teaching a lot, and we've slowed stuff down so we can go deeper into each piece. Whereas before, we were almost doing what other courses were doing and trying to cover as much, give you everything, and then people were coming back going, I got this little bit and that little bit. So I've definitely found in the last 3 years, everything's slowed down, and the feedback is I hadn't realized how much each component was making such a difference. But the order of events is now starting with something which would have been on level 2, which is the staircase. And the staircase actually is the background of everything that's going on. And so if in a workshop we understand that that's what's happening, when someone drops down the staircase, when someone arrives, and in the start of a workshop, their story sounds one way, and then something releases, something changes, they stand up, they tell the same story but completely differently. We can understand how that is influenced by our physiology, and therefore the possibilities opening up. And so I think what I've been saying a lot more in the workshops is I'm here to teach you possibility first, because if you don't know what you don't know, it's hard to teach you what you don't know that you don't know. But if I can open a window to you of what's possible, then we can say, let's now look back and say, how did we get there? Because I think I realized over the 20 odd years of teaching is that sometimes things are happening on the workshop that seem crazy, miraculous, and right there, our brain hijacks and sits there going, that's not possible. That's, and then when we're in that moment, we've stopped learning. So we want to go, hey, we're just playing with possibility, and now let's track back and look at what are the steps that got us there. And when we do that, people walk away, and the ability to use the work becomes easier because it's just possibility, and I'm very clear, and you're also clear on this, is that when someone says, let's say if we're working with an athlete, and the athlete says, can you make me faster? The answer is, I don't know, but let's have a look at your body and see what's happening. Spinal cord injuries. What can you make me walk? Because this is, I want to walk, I want to do this, I want to do that. And I don't know, but let's have a look what your body's doing and see if we can find where there are blockages that are stopping you getting to where you need to go. Using a series of principles, understanding how the body is imploding and collapsing, and maybe stopping itself getting to where it needs to go. Or maybe you're so high up in the staircase, you're in fight, flight, and freeze, you don't even know it because you've been there so long, and your body doesn't care about healing, resting, recovery, changing a pattern. What it cares about is survival. And so it's going to fight for its pattern. And as long as, the minute we get that understanding and we can start to shift the body into those different positions, then we, like, this year has been a year of me sitting going, holy shit, I didn't know this was possible. And I've been doing this for a long time, and to be in this place is exciting as hell for me.
I think that ties in a bit with some of the things that I'm going to talk about later with treatment sequence and things like that, is that I think one of the things we as therapists easily get wrong is that we think we're too clever, and we think we can see it. We think we can promise results. Yes, I can make you run faster, or yes, I know how to fix you. And I think a large part of this work is doing various things with the body and seeing what comes up and seeing what it is that we can try and influence without always knowing what the outcome would be. And sometimes the outcome, as you said, can be utterly surprising and way better than what we thought. And some clients, it's not always what I thought would happen. And that's been a big learning curve for me with this work, is actually doing the work without trying to be as clever, and to see what happens with my clients. And then adjusting what I do according to that, rather than what I decided beforehand.
Yeah, completely. And Carl, what happens is, like, if we think about the staircase now. So let's say you're going to go work with, I was going to say Melbourne Rebels, but now you know why they couldn't have that conversation with you, because they are gone. So never believe that you know where someone is at when you're talking. I had a conversation with the rugby team in Ireland where I was going to go and pop in and teach for a day, and they suddenly cancelled. And I could be offended, or I could look at a game that they lost the weekend before that they shouldn't have lost, and now everyone's in trouble. And so bringing someone in from the outside seems like a really stupid idea when you're in crisis. So but what happens when you declare that you can fix someone, because that's what people love. No, I can fix you. The minute your data, your information is not coming through the way you anticipated it, you start stressing, you start moving up the staircase, you start going into survival, fighting to be right. And then as a therapist, you are, excuse my French, you're probably gonna have to beep this one out, fucking useless. And sorry if you have children in the background, but it is amazing. And I look at every single session that I've ever truly messed up. It's when I've already decided ahead of time what's going to happen. And so I create my own stress, my own pressure, and actually my own stupidity that I get in the way of anything. The other side is, do you remember that video from the guy in New Zealand that he sent his Parkinson's patient and I think it's the one on 3,000 Stories, but there's a video that goes with it. And the Parkinson's patient was doing movement and shaking, and he just said, can we do this work with you? And the answer was yes. And the final footage that we were sent was this dude sprinting on a big field in New Zealand, and he was as good as, he could run better than I could. And at no point would you go, that's someone with Parkinson's sprinting.
Yeah.
But if you had gone, I can work with Parkinson's, this is what I can do, you've already become the limitation of the session, because you wouldn't have gone, and you know what, I think we can get you sprinting, because that would be stupid. And even when I was in the UK now, we did the Parkinson's study just before lockdown, and one of the guys there, we had 2 Neils in that workshop, and Neil, the joke was, I offended a whole lot of people because on day 4, I had Neil pushing me around the workshop in his wheelchair. And that's how far he'd come. And it was amazing, and it was beautiful, and it's amazing. Like, people who are, everything's fine, this is awesome, and then, Doug, that's offensive. Yeah, well, welcome to the world. We offend people. But about 9 months, yeah, it's part of the game. But apparently about 9 months ago, Neil had a fall. So he's been doing pretty good, and he activates, and he's part of the Parkinson's, and he had a fall. And his Parkinson's flared up super, super duper bad. And he went wheelchair, back to wheelchair, back to this, back to that. And his wife, Margaret, is a doctor, and they just made a decision together what they were going to do. And every single day they went to the gym. And he had to get on at least 5 pieces of equipment, even if he couldn't pull the weight. And they've been doing it for about 8 months. And Sue shared me videos that he'd said, please send this to Doug. He looked better than our study. Yes, he's still activating. But what he's doing is he's taking far greater action than I would have considered him to do, going to the gym every single day. This man doesn't need his wheelchair now, and it's got nothing to do with us. It's got to do with, yes, the activations help, but it's got to do with the decisions and the actions that he's then taken with him and his wife to astound us. So, like, I'm like, that's remarkable, because I would have been a limiting factor in that story, because where Neil got to is remarkable. So, yeah.
Incredible stories. And so for the guys that don't know, Doug has recently been to the UK, and Doug, you did some interesting work. I don't know how to pronounce their technique. How do you say, is it batik or batik, or how do they say that?
Again, that's the funny part. Okay, so that's in Dallas. So that's basic, actually. Basic.
Really?
And so you and I would say batchik. You're like, batchik, crazy.
I tried various different ways. I never got to that. So okay. So Doug was there to work with the guys from.
So that was Dallas. So about 3.5 years ago, Ryan had come on a workshop. We didn't have a good first meeting, which meant he was politely asked to step aside on day 2 and not come back, which happens. And sometimes you don't understand the contract that you've made with me on day 1, and if you keep breaking the contract. And he was so passionate about his clients, but he wasn't taking care of himself at all. So literally, he was someone who could have broken at any moment, while trying to help people that were technically more broken. And I was fighting for that. And it took about 6 months for peace to be restored. And I love commitment. I like, a lot of people tell me a lot of things, but show me in action. And so he kept pitching up, and I would then spend a day or 2 at his facility, and he works with spinal cord injuries and all these neurological things. And I would come in and I would see what he's doing and then assist with clients. And for me, it was cool, because I could come in and influence pretty massively what was happening, and they were already doing more than everybody else in the world was doing. And I hadn't realized that, because I didn't understand spinal cord injuries, and it's just something that we learned at university kind of thing. And but I started to get involved a little bit in the stories of the people that I'd connected with, and seeing the big shift. And Ryan's wife, Kendall, is also in a wheelchair for 15 years. She broke her neck. And so it's interesting when I was feeding stuff in and his feedback. And so eventually it was, I think it's time that we put a program together for his community. And what it ended up looking like was me in August flying over there, spending a day, literally problem solving his clients and going, what are their big problems? And Carl, for me, that was huge, because I hadn't realized how ignorant I was until we sat and went through what the actual suffering is, what the actual struggles are. Because when I was seeing them, they were putting on their best show, like a lot of your clients do.
And isn't that again what you just said, Doug, earlier, about that we need to listen to what our clients actually need and then act upon that? I think that's exactly what you said earlier.
Yeah, and it was weird, because what I thought their struggles were not their struggles. They were so I was coming in almost with the stuff that I'd already done at Ryan's place, and it was cool and it was fun, and it was like, wow, okay, so someone can now stand independently. That's nice. We had a policewoman who from New York, who'd literally, someone walked up behind her and shot her in the spine. And she'd started to feel things in her body the first 3 days of working with Ryan. And when I came on that day, we did just a little bit more. And she was able to actually stand independently and walk, which just from a reality, completely impossible, not allowed, all of those things. And then we set a goal. She wanted to walk to the other side of the facility. And halfway through, she's doing incredibly. We go under an air conditioning unit. There's enough of a disruption in her brain for her to almost wake herself out of her dream. And her brain goes, what the hell are you doing? You can't walk. And literally her body froze. She fell backwards. Ryan and I, almost like perfectly on time, just leaned, grabbed, pulled her back. Both of us have different responses. Because this is his world, he's calling for the wheelchair and the support, and I'm changing and doing the good South African thing. I gripped her by a t-shirt and went, what the fuck was that? And she goes, what do you mean? I said, you were absolutely incredible until that moment. What did you do? And it turns out that was her mind hijacking her body, because her belief system was absolutely fine for 15, 20 meters until she got slightly disrupted. And you know what she did? She said, I want to complete this. It was amazing. And she completed, and she turned, and that was her success. That wasn't my success. That was about a year and a half ago. And those kind of stories like lived in me, and they're like, wow, that's cool. I'm so glad I got to be part of that. You know, I was working with a kid who was hit by lightning. And the problem is that his parents struggle to move him. So we have to help him to help them, so that the support system works. And all of that's cool. And then I go teach and do my world. But Carl, that Monday, it was awesome, and it sucked, because I realized the depth of the suffering, and I also knew that I had something to offer, and I didn't know how much. So the Tuesday, we filmed like a zone 1 where we had whole section, full big Hollywood production, because you know we are in America, and we went through all of that, almost setting this is what we're going to do. And then the next 2 days, we had 3 clients and 3 clients, and it's crazy, because they were literally being wheeled in. And maybe I met them 5 or 10 minutes before we started filming, but that was it. So it was kind of all my favorite things, going in blind, having to ask the questions, having an editor actually who completely understood this. He took so long. It's only just everything's just being complete now, because he understood the threads that we need to have in communication. And you know, the first lady, Vicky, MS, multiple sclerosis, to the point where she can't walk, she can barely get out of the chair herself, all of these things. And in an hour and a half, we went through stuff, got the mindset, got did zone 1 breathing and so as glutes. And she came an hour later to say she'd just been to the bathroom unassisted for the first time in 6 months. And that's amazing. Wow, let's celebrate that. And then the next day she was training with someone else called Manny, and Manny's done many activation workshops as well. So he's part of Ryan's team. And they called me over going, this is remarkable. She hasn't been able to do this since 2015. And I'm like, bullshit. And she's like, this is ridiculous. And so one really for me, I'm left questioning, I've got the lecture that, imagine that everything you know to be true is wrong. I'm getting that pulled back on me a lot in the world of spinal cord injuries and neurology. And so I have to just do it. And one of the things that is not one of my weaknesses is I'm always talking when I'm doing my sessions, because that communication is so important. And so if I go on the theme of this year on where I see the biggest weakness in people doing this work, is people think they can do it without talking. You have to talk, you have to communicate. You need to establish what your client knows before you do something, because otherwise they think that they can lie on the table and stare at the ceiling, and you wonder why they're not getting the results. So I just talk what I feel when I'm in tissue. Hey, this is what I'm feeling. What are you feeling? Hey, because if we start talking about, next weekend's game, well, we're both not there in the room. And like in the world of spinal cord injuries, the system is still unsafe. It's still stuck in the trauma. Like there's not a single person that I've worked with that's not still stuck in the trauma. They just don't know it. And guess what? We have a set of skills and tools to help them come out of that.
If I can jump in with that talking to them, for me, what's so important with that as well is I believe it's really important your client has to understand what we're doing or what we're trying to do with them. If they need to be part of that process, not just us pressing buttons and, oh, look how strong you are. If you don't, I spend a lot of time trying to explain to my clients what it is that I'm doing and what I'm trying to achieve here because if they're not buying in on that process, then you're not going to win. It has to be their process, and in order for them to be their process, you need to understand a bit about why are you rubbing on weird spots. So I think that builds trust and gives them a bit of understanding of what we're doing, and then it's much easier for someone to buy in. Yes, I feel my leg is stronger, but it can't be magic because this is what we're doing. I think that's really important.
So one of the spinal cord stories. So after that, I actually went to Kenya to do a private contract. There's a wonderful man called Tej who, while driving a rally car in Kenya, did a little spin and now he's in a wheelchair. And he on day one, in the evening, we were doing a different assessment with him in the parallel bars. And he was literally all arms, and just out of interest, he was a 3-3-3 arm on the side, which means it's got to shorten, tighten, bring forward. So it was always throwing his body the wrong direction. And it's a 3-3-3 leg on the other side, which means he's got an unstable shoulder. So it gets tired and sore and quits on him quickly. So even though he can't feel anything below his waist, this is still playing out. So just as a side thing. So one of his therapists is in front of him. They've got calipers on and they're meant to like click in. And she's got her hands on his butt because she's trying to pull his hips forward. And I'm just meant to be assessing, but this is me. I can't stop. And I just said, dude, this looks awful. I don't want to see anymore. Can I rub the back of your neck? And it's like, sure. And I rubbed the back of his neck and literally doot. And the therapist goes, whoa, I felt your glutes. And he goes, I felt my glutes too. And you go, and me, because I'm a comedian too, I go, well, you guys are full of shit because one, Haley, that can't happen. And two, Tej, you can't feel below your waist, so stop talking shit. And he's like, no, I really felt that. And then Tej's brother goes, oh my God, look at him standing. And this man's gone from this collapsed to beautiful, up straight. And suddenly his hands go from this to completely relaxed. And he's literally resting his forearms on the parallel bars. And I'm like, holy shit, this is pretty cool. So the record that he'd ever had in those calipers, Carl, was 7 minutes. And at 7 minutes, literally his blood pressure goes wild. He collapses and they fall him back into the chair. At 30 minutes, we were a little bit bored. So we decided that was enough. And so it's like, you can't script this, which is why I keep coming back to this like, this is the body. This is something that his body needed that it didn't know it could do. Now that it knows it can do it, it can bring something from the realm of what you didn't know that you didn't know, and at least into what you didn't know, but that you know that you don't know. So this is why we're going to record this.
This
so
is
you can
recorded.
go
We
through
can play it back
slowly.
many times, guys, if you didn't
Yeah.
get it.
So one of the challenges for people is post-August and post-Kenya, like I'm way more excited. So I have to, like, it's kind of hard to put the brakes on a little bit, because you know as much as anyone that sometimes, like in this work, I have the feeling of like, is this all bullshit? Does this work maybe just we talk good, we rub stuff, we distract people? And the thing is, the world of spinal cord injuries is fascinating because they've already hit their limits. They you know, and so you either, the system's either safer for what we do or it's not. And if it is, what other possibilities can we create? I don't know, but let's go see. You know, and the second person that we filmed in Dallas was Kendall. And Kendall's been, as I said, in a wheelchair for 15 years. And her husband is one of the best in the world on working with spinal cord injuries. And, you know, basically he broke the golden rule because she hired him to take care of her, and then they got married and have a family with 3 kids. You know, it's crazy. But she thought, since they've set up the business, that she was the example of what's possible, but from 10 years ago, which means nothing has really changed for her in the last 10 years, maybe 5 years. And we filmed the second session with her, and we slowed it down and we got an assessment. Doug stepped in and said, oh, hang on, there's a little bit of a scolding that has to happen in there because that's just how it works. And then we worked through, and whether it was psoas or glute, I don't know. But she got a totally different function in the parallel bars that she's not had. She thought she was already done with her journey, and she was the one at the end of the marathon waving to other people going, you can do it. And what we've discovered is she was just on one phase of her marathon. And that wasn't meant to happen. That was like, she was going to be the easy case where we just show how it can help with day-to-day function. But actually, you know, she talks about lefty and righty, and, you know, I can always trust lefty, but righty, ooh, I don't know. And righty suddenly came to play. And it's like, what?
What I take from what you're telling us today is something that, you know, in medicine and different fields, but specifically maybe in neuro, given we're talking neuro today, there's just some rules. If your spinal cord is severed, there's no nerve function. So, you know, whatever you do to try and wake these muscles, nerves up is going to fail because we know there's no nerve function, you know, and it just highlights that I think there's so many things that in medicine we're quite adamant on, we know, but there's just so much about the body that we don't understand. And it doesn't mean that science is wrong. It just means that we don't understand a lot of these things. And therefore we need to, sometimes if I see neuro clients, that's exactly what I tell them. I tell them, I don't know if this is going to help you, but I have seen some incredible results. And I do think it's worth it. We should try and see what happens, because it may make a big difference for you. And then if you do, then, you know, stories like you sharing with us is not uncommon with us in that field.
Yeah, you know, Carl, I think the challenge with science is, and with research, is that in order to do effective research, you have to niche it down, and take away all other factors in order to measure something, which from a study research perspective is something you have to do. The problem is that's not how life works. It's sure as hell not how the body works. You know, we've got someone walking across a room, that's impossible, who gets disrupted by airflow from an air conditioner down on her, and suddenly she can't move and can't walk and can't do things. And And so, you know, what are you going to do? An airflow study? You know, we're going to take people who can't walk and put them under an air conditioning unit. It's got to be a specific strength, speed, noise, this, you know, it's like, no, it's our bodies are amazing, and like we're meaning-making machines, and we're being impacted by the world in 1,000 different ways. And the goal for me is, do I know where I am? Do I know where I am, and how can I interpret that? If I don't know where I am because my nervous system is hijacking me and it's in survival, all I'm going to do is be focused on all these external things. And so they're all going to be impacting on me. And, you know, it's kind of, we all reach those phases where we get so busy with our clients, with our families, with our obligations, responsibilities, and we lose sight of ourselves. And I just say that's where I've been. I've come back from the trip. There's a whole lot of other stuff that's happened on this last trip, which is like potentially huge for what we're going to do. And I came home ready to celebrate and go, woohoo, let's go. And my body went, no chance, buddy. And like, I've been struggling. And then yesterday, I'm like, hell no, come, let's slow this down. What the hell am I doing? And it doesn't help that my accountants got on me on Monday and reprimanded me, and there's a whole lot of stuff I haven't done. So you go from like, oh shit, you know, tax season is now. All of those things impact. And I hadn't realized just how much until I couldn't get out of my recovery phase, or I couldn't get into my recovery phase. And then when I recognize it, which is last night, like, then I'm a pain in the ass. Then Amy's like, can you just turn the lights off? You can keep doing your weird and wacky stuff, because I keep going, oh, look what else my body can do, you know? And it's amazing. You've got to reorientate yourself. Then the world looks different. But if you don't know where you are, then the world is going to suck. No matter, you know, it's hard to not know where you are and find good stuff. When you know where you are, finding good stuff is easy peasy.
Nice. So
I must have put something in my tea, because I do feel really hyped up seeing you, Oaks. This is like, can you imagine spending 4 days with me? We're in Scotland, we all stayed in the same damn hotel. So we walked from the venue across to the restaurant, which sadly enough also had a bar attached to it. So it was a very continuous process.
So talking about spending 4 days with Doug. So just before we go on with some more learning, just that you all know what's coming up in the next the next half of the year, I would say. On Saturday, I'm teaching a level 1 course in Melbourne. If you haven't signed up, you're too late, unfortunately, but we're going to be
that's so mean.
Almost
I wanted to sign up, dude.
A nice full class for Melbourne that's starting on Saturday, which I'm excited about. Thereafter, Doug, early February, Doug sounds like he's off to US again, to Columbus, Dallas, California. After that, Indonesia, Jakarta, Bali. And then me and Doug are going to team up in Sydney, and we're going to be teaching a 4-day workshop together again in Sydney. And that's something you guys have to put into your calendars. The dates are not final yet, but I will be having final dates soon, because we still...
What do you mean they're not final? They're on my piece of paper. They must be final. Look,
if Doug has it scheduled, then you have
my
to know.
calendar for next year.
If Doug has a calendar, I don't even know what to say about that. But we will get those dates as soon as the venues are confirmed. But some exciting stuff there. And South Africa,
and Doug might also go to Taipei after that.
Taipei is also apparently on the cards for Doug. And in June, July, I'll be coming back to South Africa, and I'll be trying to pull Doug in, that we do some good teaching whilst we're there. So look out for those dates, which will be coming soon. And then lastly, we're working still on a plan that started last year for New Zealand. And hopefully by the end of next year, there's going to be some teaching in New Zealand. So keep an eye out for all of that. Right, that's just a bit of a sales pitch, but this getting
man back in the corner of my screen here in a very dark room, waving his hands around. I wonder who that could be. Where in South Africa? Just be grateful that he's coming to South Africa. We don't know. Well, I don't even know. I don't know where I am. I thought I was actually up Kilimanjaro in that time.
Well, that's
I don't
the
know.
thing. I don't know yet, but there's
So
hopefully some sort of
just like put it on me.
All right. So just one little thing that I wanted to touch on before we go on to questions. I always try and bring in just a little bit of teaching. It's nothing new, but something that I think is important, and I'm literally going to do it in 5 minutes, is why do we work in sequence? For those of you that have got used to jumping around and, you know, and interesting, we talked about it earlier, is that we think we're clever and I can see, look, he's got a jaw pattern. All I need to do is sort that jaw out and we're going to change his life. And my clinical reasoning has led me to see that I don't need to do all this other stuff. I just need to do his jaw or whatever it is that happens. So I wanted to touch on why is sequence important? Now, to understand why sequence is important, I think one has to get back to why does someone develop a pattern? So if we just take an example of a 3-3-3 jaw pattern, for those that are unsure, that's when someone initiates their movement by tensing and engaging their jaw and the sternocleidomastoid every time before they move. If that's their pattern.
Can I be a pain? Sorry, sir, may I be a pain? So I just want to tell you that every single Parkinson's patient that we have worked on, which is a lot, they've all been bilateral jaws.
Oh, wow.
Okay. It doesn't mean if you're a bilateral jaw, you will get Parkinson's. Let me be clear. I'm working with someone in Cape Town who's a surfer who, as a favor to a friend, who had a stroke. Okay. Who's a jaw driver, badly wore down his teeth, and the stroke is an occlusion stroke up here. Think about downward pressure. So it's just since I'm playing in the world of neurology, it's like, doesn't mean we're right, but can we see the risks that over time come with each pattern? Okay, I'm out.
So if you have a jaw pattern, the reason why the client has that pattern is why? It's because they don't have control in zone 1. That's why your body is doing this. Because you don't have control in zone 1, you can't initiate movement in zone 1, your body finds another way. And in that example, they initiate their movement in their jaw. Therefore, the jaw is always tight. Therefore, they get pain, headaches, neck pain, etc. So if we were to jump in and be clever, no, I can see it's his jaw, we just need to sort that out, and I dig my thumbs into his jaw and whatever your techniques, we whack needles in there, whatever you want to do, you won't get a great result because his body...
You'd start with a new jaw point first, though, wouldn't you?
Yes.
So, I think I did teach that, right?
Yes, we did. Yeah.
Okay, sure. Okay, so you at least know what I'm talking about. Anyone who wasn't there was going, "What new jaw point?" Well, you know.
We did. So if you were going to if you jump in there and you try and release his jaw, and it's his way of moving. So he needs his jaw to be tight in order to move. This is the only way his body knows how to move. You will be rather unsuccessful because his body cannot let go of that pattern because this is the only way he can move. And we haven't given him an alternative. So this is why sequence is important. So in order to help restore his pattern, we need to get his body to move more correctly first. Yes, Doug. I like
so
that.
The other thing is that
we're improving.
I'm learning. The other thing is that if you take someone's pattern away without putting the thing that they need in place first, you actually make them unsafe.
Yes.
And so for me, the greater risk here is that we take someone's pattern away, they get up, they're going, "Oh, wow, this feels a little strange." And you go, no, it's just different because I've released you. And you convince them that whatever they're feeling is awesome because it's different. Yeah. And maybe it's unsafe. And so it's almost the body hasn't had time enough to lock the jaw up again to make them safe, because that's why it's there in the first place. And because of that, we have trouble. And so I don't, and again, spinal cord injuries, it's fascinating because you have to see that you ask them to do something, they're absolutely fine with you, and suddenly the thing you've just asked them to do appears unsafe to their system, and then they just go, Jook. So we talk safe, unsafe. But in people who are high functioning, you don't talk that. Don't be so silly. But the body is unsafe if it doesn't have a compensation to do the fight, flight, or freeze. Whereas we go, do you have to choose fight, flight, or freeze? What happens if there's another choice? What happens if strength comes from a different place? What happens if ease comes from a different place? And so, as Carl's saying, is if you go and attack the thing that's keeping them alive, you may not be serving them at all. And sometimes it gives them a little bit of relief.
Yeah, but it will typically be short term, and those patterns will return until we give them an alternative, which is why we're going to be working on the diaphragm. We're going to be getting zone 1 working. Then we're going to move through the sequence, putting all these building blocks in place so that the body has integrity and feels safe. And if we then eventually get to the jaw and we release the jaw, by the time you get there, there's often not much to release because it's already, your body doesn't need that pattern anymore, and therefore a lot of the tension would have already gone. And whatever residual tension is then still left there, we go and release by the time we get to the jaw. And if we work like that, then we can achieve much more long-term results. Those are the main, just in 5 minutes, why sequence is important. And if we start getting clever and skipping steps, you've heard us tell these stories many times, but me, Doug, and some of the other experienced therapists out there will tell you, we make mistakes and you get bad results. And if you particularly do that when you early in your career with this work, you lose confidence, your client lose confidence, and it ends up being a no-win for all, for you as a therapist or for your clients. So follow the sequence, because otherwise you'll miss steps. And if you follow the sequence, you get much better results than when you use your clever clinical reasoning on its own. That's my story about that. I wanted to say that just.
But that's beautiful. So keep, Carl, when we talk about things that change, so I'm sure that everyone on watching this or listening to this would know that we start with breathing with the upside down Y. We come up the sternum, we go to the top, and then we do the little hooky things. Just off the sternum, under the clavicle, in these corners. Why? Why there? There was put because sometimes when you have a jaw driver, their system gets bored with all the other sequencing we're doing. And so this pulls in the jaw drivers and creates change through the system quite early in the very first thing. It doesn't clear it, but it opens it up and it starts talking to it. And so they have shifts and changes far earlier. That doesn't mean that anyone who's not a jaw driver don't do these points. Do these points. They're huge. They're really important. They're little, so we're coming up, and little hooky things there. That's why they're there. They're there because of, it's easy to rush to something.
All right, Doug, we're going to get to some questions. Otherwise, we're not going to get to them. So, guys, in the week, well, a little bit late, yesterday, I put a message out for anyone that, next time I'll do it earlier, that had questions. If they submitted them to us earlier, then they would have preference that we would look at those questions first. And I got a couple of questions, so I'm going to start with those. The first one was from Andy Scott. Andy, you ask how to integrate new changes after activating, i.e. zone 1 activity, stimulating better patterns. Now, I'm going to have to get you to unmute and just explain to me just a bit better what is it that you want to know, because I don't understand that fully.
Okay. So just to try and have some sort of setup after we do the activations, as where do you lead somebody after that?
Where do we go after that?
So I think it's just useful for people to kind of have a think about how you stimulate a better pattern afterwards, to try and get diaphragm, breath, zone 1 sort of stuff happening, and how do they visit in their lives?
The guys, Doug's hands up. Doug, yes?
Yeah.
I'm learning. Look, I went from a finger to a whole hand. So Andy, I think everything starts with where did they come from first? So a little old person who their back was hurting, their feet were aching, and you are helping them to get greater mobility around their house and be able to walk into the garden and maybe down the street. You're returning them to those things. So you are going to coach them and cue them in the activities that they want to go into. I tend not to give people new activities that they've never done before. I like to give them things that they've already come in with. So if I've got an athlete or someone who's going back to the gym, I'm going to be talking about, so can you go and do, your shoulder press, your bench press, your squat? Can you actually make sure that your breathing is where we've had it? I might say to them, start with lower weights, get comfortable, and then go into that. Make sure that you're moving this way. You can activate before, you can activate between sets, you can activate afterwards, so that you're setting your system. Particularly when we're getting them to do activities that they know well, like let's say someone in the gym, someone who's doing training. I want them to almost do their first one just as they know it. And then I want them to activate, because I want their nervous system to go, oh my goodness, that makes a difference. You know, one of the coaches that I worked with at Matt's school years ago, Colin Forer, an amazing coach working with under 11s. And so when we'd moved on, he continued doing activations with his rugby team. And so they would do it before practice and before matches. And the one day he decided to say to them, today we're not doing activation. And he had these little under 11s literally go on strike and refuse to go and play a very important rugby match unless they activated, which meant they, at 11 years old, knew completely the value of what they were doing. So the compliance was always there because it made a difference. And so it's about how do we let them feel and see. So if I don't say to someone, okay, dear, you're going to have a walk across the room. Let's quickly rub this, so you'll be better. I'd like to maybe say, but maybe do a sit to stand. And they're like, oh, that feels horrible. Okay, cool. Now sit down, do your activations, whatever zone 1 and whatever important ones they have to do. So don't give people too much, and then get them to do it again. Then they're like, whoa, that's amazing. Right then, they're all in. And that's how we get the continuity. But if we just say, oh no, just see how it goes, it's harder for people because it's all new.
Yeah. Cool. So the next question.
Does that kind of get there, Andy?
Yeah. I think it's ongoing. How do we try and establish like the zone 1 as the new solid pattern?
Well, it's a habit, you see it. And the thing is
that's the journey.
That when you have things that they can use to check in with themselves, and which is why, like, if we're doing a sit to stand, like if I do it on a workshop with you, we'll say, what is this? Well, this is my sit to stand right here, right now, today. If I did it in an hour's time, it might be different. So where am I now? Let's do an intervention. Let's see where I am now. And so our nervous system is constantly comparing, because I know where I am, because I know where I was, and I know where I am now. And so if we can feed into the way the nervous system talks to itself and orientates itself, we're a far better chance of being successful. And we teach our clients to understand that.
Yeah, repetition, familiarity, just it feeling good each time they're doing it. Yeah,
and also someone who's already dropped down the staircase, had a significant shift in their physiology and further down, it's far easier for them. There are some that we haven't quite cracked that code yet, so they're using it to maintain where they are, where somebody else has found a new place that they're almost like, it's so weird. I go walking and I can see my belly. I'm out here, so they have less cueing that they need because their body wants to go there. So there's that. Like, I've had clients come back saying the coolest things. It's like, I was feeling absolutely amazing, my breathing, and then, you know, I don't know, the neighbor rang to complain about my dog, and I could feel my breathing lock up. And I'm like, that's awesome. So you noticed? Yeah. And it took me about 5 minutes to find it again. You know, I did shoot my neighbor first, and then I felt much better. But sorry. But yeah. Yes, Carl?
Thank you, Doug. So let's move on to another question. Thank you, Andy, just so we get through a few. Wendy Edwards, I see Wendy dropped off. She said she had to go and tend to a client. Well, Wendy asked how to integrate. Oh, sorry, no, that was good. She asked, why are hip flexors so difficult to activate? I often don't get an end result of a 1-2-3 pattern. So I'm not sure, as far as I wouldn't say that hip flexors are notoriously difficult to activate, but there are sometimes clients that we work with, and even though we've done all the activations and even the new ones that Doug have taught us, and we still don't get a good result. And normally when that's the case, one has to keep moving on with the sequence of work, because there's often something else further down the chain that's actually limiting that client in using the SOAS. So good examples are, you might get the SOAS active, but if there's anything in that client's makeup that locks down their pelvis, then we know the SOAS can't function optimally. So even though you've activated it, we need to continue with the sequence and possibly get to unlocking the abdominals when we do the quad activation, or we need to unlock the QL when we're doing the lateral system activation. And you'll find once we have that pelvis moving, often then only we get the SOAS kicking in.
The full firing of the SOAS, yeah. So one of the things that I said earlier, Carl, is communication. Sometimes you actually haven't engaged with your client enough to give them a clear instruction. Sometimes, like everything that Carl said is completely right, but the other factors too. Sometimes we've changed words. We say, okay, 1, 2, 3, resist me. What the hell's that? We don't do resist, we hold. It's a very different physiological measure. And so if you are someone to resist, they're waiting for your stimulus before they do something, so they're already going to fail. Hold, you don't need me to hold, everyone hold your hand just above your forehead. Isn't that amazing? You can do it and nobody has to do anything. And now we can just say, can you keep holding it there and test it? That's all it is. Whereas if I say, okay, guys, put your hand up here, put your hand back up and resist me. Doesn't that feel stupid? But Doug, you're in Cape Town. Beautiful Cape Town, that is. But you're in Cape Town, yes. So all of that also makes a difference. So sometimes, always there's something further down the chain influencing the impact. But a lot of the times we have to take a step back and say, what the hell am I doing that could be impacting? Because if it's 1 or 2 clients, I'd understand that. If it's all my clients, then there's probably something in the environment or what I'm doing or how I'm communicating that's making me not as effective.
Cool. If we can look through the questions that were posted tonight, I'm just going to quickly scan through the questions on the...
And Stephanie, yes, Cape Town is a far better place. And the fact that you say, I just want to know if I deserve a weekend in Cape Town. Young lady, you deserve whatever you choose. So don't make us the reason that you deserve stuff. You deserve stuff because you're awesome and cool. Well, I hope you're awesome and cool.
We will be talking about that soon.
Yeah.
I'm not young anymore, but thanks, Doug. But I do need a weekend without all my hungry children and cats, and I do need a weekend in Cape Town. You're right.
So Sophia, I see there's a question, but I don't know what that's related to. You say, do you have a hypothesis as to why/what the correlation is between what are we talking about here?
That was when Doug was talking about the bilateral jaw and Parkinson's.
Well, if you lock your jaw up and you put your head in a particular position, you too will develop Parkinson's in 2 seconds. And so it's a pattern that if you lock and take your head forward, please don't do this at home, folks. This is not nice. If you do down and move forward, you will block in here. Okay, 0 glutes. But now the very first thing that we all learned at university or wherever we studied, Parkinson's, you have a struggle to initiate movement. You lock this up because of the jaw, you immediately are limiting your ability to initiate movement. So we start to develop strategies. We start rocking the body and doing all these things. So that would be that. Like there are many ways on correlation, but it's just for me, it's interesting that every single one that we've assessed, whether it's in South Africa or in the UK or the US, that's what we're seeing.
Can I just say a bit like chicken and egg kind of there? Like, have those people, is there something that has caused kind of the bilateral jaw to begin with? Because we're seeing so many more cases of Parkinson's worldwide. Like, is there something in our environment?
How about this for a silly little one, as we are all sitting here? Imagine I don't know, spent a whole long time in front of my computer. And I like my jaw as and then I go, what? Sorry, what did you say? Sorry, what did you say? And I keep coming further forward. Now I'm stuck in that position because that might become habitual. So let's say my vision doesn't like my screen. So I keep coming forward. I start, and now you add stress, because you asked me to go bike ride in Tasmania. Oh, no, I'm stressed because you haven't. Okay, that was it. And
You're invited, Doug.
yeah, and so like I finish another stressful Zoom meeting. I'm locked up here. I stand up slowly. I kind of, as I get up, I ask myself, shit, what's wrong with me? And I keep asking those questions. Then my brain starts answering it. Well, it's because you're this, because you're that, because you're this. Now, as I lock up any area, I start to influence blood flow, and so this blood flow idea is really important, because if I compress an area, I'm going to start to change the signals from through my brainstem. I'm going to therefore start to change oxygenation through systems. I'm going to start to change the different receptors and how much they are. The big one is dopamine. So when we did the Parkinson's study, because of something that I was doing in London, I'm talking to a production company. I've got to do a lot of let me show you all of the different aspects. And I found a clip where I'm talking about dopamine to the Parkinson's study. And it's the very same conversation I have with spinal cord, except it's not about dopamine. It's about scarcity. And so Parkinson's comes with a dopamine scarcity, which means be very careful, because once you've used it up, you're in trouble. And so that's the philosophy. And so I was opening it up saying, I'm just wondering if we can change the idea of the scarcity around dopamine by saying, if I've got a scarcity of oxygen, my body is going to say I must be stressed and my life must be under threat. But if I am under threat, whatever patterns I've already got, it's going to hold in scarcity. So my client in Kenya, it was amazing how a very intelligent man, a very powerful man, each sentence that came out of his mouth for the first half day had scarcity attached to it. Be careful, watch out when things go wrong. And I'm like, dude, if we can't change that, we're not going to do anything, because you are going to find reasons to fail because you're worried you're going to run out of energy. You're going to run out of, he had a window for the last 3 years of what he could do. And that thing in the parallel bars called bullshit on that. And so my question, it's a question, is not this is what I think. I'm wondering whether anything that we put as scarcity is just a stress response, and if it's dopamine, if it's function, and what happens if we can shift the body and ask it different questions of it. Does it bring more to us? And the answer may be no. But what if the answer is yes?
And I think on that note, we're going to leave it so that everyone can get back to their jobs and everything we need to do. Guys, thank you very much for joining us. Douglas Hill, thank you for sharing your insights with us. As always, we all learning together, and it was great to have you on the webinar again tonight. I'm looking forward to meeting up with you hopefully sometime soon. And we're looking forward to seeing all of you on our workshops coming
Hopefully,
to you.
I think I'm going to be there in March, dude. There's no hopefully. Sort the friggin' venue out.
No, we're doing it in March. It's just the date we need to finalize. All right, guys, it's been great seeing all of you. Chat soon.
Thank you, everyone.
Cheers.